It's your boy, and we're back with another Master Duel video. Today I've got something special for you guys. Today we're going to be talking about hand traps and how to avoid them. Now, the first thing I want to say before we get into all the hand traps, what they do, what you can do to avoid them, the first thing I would like to say is that not every deck can play through hand traps the same, or even have the ability to play through some hand traps. Some hand traps are just extremely detrimental to a particular strategy, and it's good to get familiar with whatever interruptions could end up halting whatever strategy it is that you're deciding to play. So keeping that in mind, not everything you're going to be able to play through, and not every hand can do it. There are some things that you can do, some precautions that you can take in order to make your game a little bit better. Now, we're going to start with what I believe are the most common hand traps, and then we're going to move down the line a bit to some not as common but still very relevant, and then what you can do to what you can play to also help with that. So, the first hand trap we'll start with is Maxi. Now, off to the side here, we'll go ahead and read the card. Quick effect: you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard. This turn, each time your opponent special summons a monster or monsters, immediately draw one card. You can only use this effect of Maxi once per turn. So what we can take from that: this is a hard once per turn because it references Maxi in the name or in the effect when stating that it's once per turn. So it doesn't matter if you get another copy or anything, you're only using Maxi once. Now the main effect, the actual hand trap effect, drawing one card for your opponent's special summoning. This, as I've stated before, is probably the strongest hand trap in Yu-Gi-Oh! Most of Master Duel is kind of shaped around this card even being legal. There's a very good reason why it's banned in the TCG, but there's also a reason why it's not banned in the OCG. You know, each opinion aside, this card you're going to be keeping in mind every single game, really. Unless you're playing a deck that really doesn't care about your opponent dropping Maxi, like if you play nothing but normal summons like Fluwandereeze or True Draco, or maybe your deck has a really good answer for when Maxi comes down, you have an option to go into. Whatever it is, Maxi is very, very, very good and should be played in like every single deck that you make. It is that good. And because of it, you're going to be seeing some other staples that are very, very good that are being played in almost every single list because of how strong Maxi is. Maxi is just that great of a card. What you can do to play around it, there really isn't a lot that you can do to play around it. But some things you can do is you can start with a monster that has an inherent summon effect. And by that I mean you don't activate an effect in order to special summon a monster. An example of this would be, see if I can't find it real quick, Kashtira. Kashtira is an excellent example of cards that just come down, no effect is activated. That means they can't chain Maxi. They can't respond with your attempt to summon with Maxi against the Kashtira cards. Diabellstar is also like this. you can start with a card like Kashtira and get that summon off without them getting a draw if they've yet to activate Maxi. That is one of the few things that you can do to play around Maxi. What I stated earlier is if your strategy plays something or has a maybe a combo or something that only special summons one time. Kind of weird to say combo when you only have one special summon. But, you know, if your deck can do some things by only giving your opponent one, maybe two cards from the drawing effect, that could be an option as well. A deck that can do something like that is actually Branded. Branded is very good at doing it. Let's type up. You can't always find all the cards to Branded very easily. They're under many, many different types of text. Albion, the Sanctifier Dragon, is typically Branded's answer to Maxi coming down. You only give them one card because you special summon the one time. Then you'll use Fallen of Albaz as part of the material, so it should be in graveyard. And the idea with Albion is that it can summon two monsters to the field during your opponent's turn, one to your opponent's field and one to your field. And the idea is you're going to summon Fallen of Albaz. Albaz will attempt to fuse with one of your opponent's monsters. Ideally, it's some sort of extra deck monster, Link monster, fusion, doesn't matter. And then you go into Mirror Jade with it. And then Mirror Jade will be another interruption in itself with the banishing effect. Now, you get multiple disruptions, interruptions, off of just the one summon. So Albion is a very good quote-unquote answer to Maxi, but not every deck has something that can be done under the effect of a Maxi having been resolved. That is why Maxi is so good. Even if your deck does have some sort of answer, you're still probably getting some sort of really good benefit out of this with Maxi resolving. It'll keep your opponent from going very far, even if they're able to put an Albion. Just think about the other things they could have summoned on top of it to help stop your plays. Even if you only get one draw, that's one more than you had before. It's overall an extremely, extremely good card. Maxi should be played in every single deck that you have. The next most common hand trap pairs with Maxi, Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. Ash Blossom is like the definition of a good hand trap. Like, really, honestly, almost every single hand trap that gets released is compared to Ash Blossom. Is it as good as Ash Blossom to be almost an instant slot in your deck every single time? Ash Blossom is just that good. Now, you can activate Ash Blossom during your opponent's turn, during your turn. Same thing with Maxi. But it's when your opponent attempts to use any of these effects. Now, that's what's really good about Ash Blossom, is that it doesn't have one thing that it can stop. It has 3 different things that it can stop. And these 3 things are, if our opponent attempts to do any of these 3 things, we can discard this out of the hand and negate the effect. Extremely good. Those 3 things are adding a card from the deck to the hand, so a searching effect, special summoning from the deck, or sending a card from the deck to the graveyard. All 3 of these effects are extremely common, extremely good, and a lot of times will make a deck fall flat on its face if Ash Blossom resolves. Ash Blossom is just that good and is kind of like the main marker to a modern deck or a legacy deck. What I mean by that is if your deck gets shut down instantly by Ash Blossom, it might be a legacy deck. Modern decks have this, like when they're designed by Konami, it has this card in mind. If your modern deck cannot play through an Ash Blossom, you've got a real problem, and you need to make some tunes to your list. Now, what I would say is the next most common hand trap, and there's a hand trap after this one that I would say is climbing up the ladder and overtaking it, is Infinite Impermanence. This, I will say, actually, let's bring it back. Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. How do you play around it? The best way to play around an Ash Blossom is first you're trying to figure out if they have one. If really, when it comes to playing around hand traps in general, you're analyzing your hand of cards and trying to determine out of all these really common hand traps, which one hurts me the most right now. And then start playing your hand with that in mind, trying to bait that potential hand trap out with as many enticing cards as possible. So if your hand is really weak to Ash Blossom, specifically on one card, but you have multiple other cards to help you see if your opponent has that, and by what I mean is you have other searching effects, you have other things that special summon from the decks, stuff like that, you can check to see if your opponent has an Ash Blossom. And actually, we can get into a little bit of that, but we'll go over Infinite Impermanence real quick, and then we'll move on to a bit of a demonstration, and then we can get back to talking about the rest of the hand traps. But Infinite Impermanence, one of the best hand traps in the game. It's good going first, it's good going second. What it does is if you control no cards, you can activate it from your hand, even though it is a trap. And then on your opponent's turn, you can target one face-up monster your opponent controls and negate its effects until the end of the turn. That is extremely good. Just negating something that has a really powerful effect on the board. Something like Snake Eye Ash. Snake Eye Ash is very, very beneficial to stop with something like Infinite Impermanence. Now, why is something like Infinite Impermanence played over something like Effect Veiler, which basically does the same thing, right? Well, there's multiple reasons. The first reason is the most obvious reason, which is if you read Effect Veiler, and we'll cover it real quick, it's only during your opponent's main phase can you use it as a hand trap. Infinite Impermanence isn't restricted to the main phase and isn't restricted to your opponent's turn. You can use it on your turn as well. And you can just straight up activate this out of the hand, not in response to anything, at almost any time as long as you control no cards. Very, very strong. Very, very strong. As well, something like Called by the Grave cannot stop Infinite Impermanence, because Called by the Grave targets a monster in your opponent's graveyard and you banish it. With Infinite Impermanence being a trap card, there's even less ways than something like Effect Veiler from Infinite Impermanence being stopped. Very strong card. And since it negates the monster while it's on the field, something like Snake Eye Ash is a great example. Snake Eye Ash, when it gets normal summoned, will attempt to search. Now, initially, you're going to be stopping that search effect with Infinite Impermanence when you lay it down. But why also is it very good against Snake Eye Ash in particular? Well, Snake Eye Ash has a secondary effect where it can send itself from the field plus another face-up card and special summon a Snake Eye monster from the deck. You are negating that as well, because that's an effect that gets activated while it's face-up on the field. And since Infinite Impermanence just shuts it down and negates the entire card while it's face-up and for the rest of the turn, they won't get that opportunity. So when faced with a Snake Eye Ash and you have an Ash Blossom or an Infinite Impermanence, it is typically better actually to use the Infinite Impermanence instead of the Ash Blossom, because you'll still be stopping the search effect, which is something the Ash Blossom can do. But you'll also be stopping the ability to special a Snake Eye from the deck instead. So overall, Infinite Impermanence, an excellent card. Excellent card. So since we've covered the 3 most common hand traps in the game, let's go over it again real quick. Maxi, Ash Blossom, Infinite Impermanence. Before we move on to any more of the other hand traps, I'd like to go through a bit of a demonstration, go over some gameplay that I have to give you guys a better idea of how to hunt for those traps, how to feel them out. Alright, so this is some gameplay I have of Branded during one of my previous Branded videos, and this is going to be a hand of us going second, but you'll see why we chose going second instead of going first here in a second, because there's a lot going on here in the first few minutes. So we're going second already. During the standby phase, I'm choosing to draw Mulch Army Fulos. Now there are multiple reasons why it's happening now, and we're choosing Fulos. Before we even get into everything that's going on, just a quick cover. We'll go into more detail here after we move back into talking about hand traps. Mulch Army Fulos is one of those hand traps that's gaining in popularity these days. That is the attempt to nerf or to balance Maxi. So it has an extremely similar effect to Maxi, just not as many opportunities to draw. It has some specific conditions on the special summons, but most of them are the most crucial and where you'll be getting a lot of draws if your opponent decides to play through it. And the most important thing is not only is it basically another Maxi, but it also gets stopped in the same ways that Maxi gets stopped. So dropping Fulos before Maxi is me checking to see if they have an answer to a card like Maxi. And if they were to stop our Mulch Army Fulos with like Called by the Grave or Ash Blossom, then we baited out their ability to stop our drawing effects, and we can immediately drop Maxi as well. So even though we aren't getting the Fulos off, we're getting the better hand trap off instead. So That's why we decided to drop Fuelos first and not Maxi. Why are we dropping it in the standby phase and not the main phase? Why aren't we waiting for a card to come out from our opponent first? Well, there's multiple reasons. One, we are trying to play around a card called Triple Tactics Talent. And that's a card that will allow our opponent to look into our hand and rip any card from our hand and shuffle it back into our deck. They get to pick. They get to see our hand through it too. So they can see probably the best card in our hand, send it back, and we probably won't be able to play through whatever they've got. It's extremely good. They can also choose to draw 2 cards, or if we control the monster, they can take control of that monster until the end of the turn. Extremely, extremely good card. The only caveat is that in order to even activate it, your opponent has to activate a monster during the main phase. So us not activating our Fuelos, a monster, during the main phase and choosing to drop it during the standby phase means that their potential Triple Tactics talents isn't going to be activatable, at least not yet. So that would be the reason why we're dropping Fuelos, and we're dropping it in the standby phase. So let's go ahead and move forward. So no response. The Fuelos has resolved. It's active now every time they summon from the deck or the extra deck. We're going to be drawing. So at this moment, I'm feeling okay. So no Called by the Grave, no Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. That's what I'm reading off of this. He didn't have the cards to stop Fuelos, so we should be good from those cards specifically. Now, let's go back a little bit. Rewind it a little bit. Wait for Fuelos to drop. Now watch our opponent's side of the field. Right now, we have blue on the bottom of our field. This blue tinting means that we have something that we can activate. And the red tinting is the same thing for our opponent's field. And you'll notice we activate Fuelos. Waiting, nothing. We saw no red tinting, and we cut it there. We saw no red tinting from our opponent's field, which in our mind, now it's not guaranteed, but in our mind, we're now believing, okay, they had no cards, no potential cards that they could have responded with in that scenario from the Fuelos dropping. They activated no Ash Blossom. They activated no Called by the Grave. Had no opportunity to even chain anything. We should be in the clear. We shouldn't have to care about much. Now, we skipped forward a little bit. We dropped and resolved the Fuelos. Our opponent just passed turn. Apparently, they didn't have a very good hand into Fuelos, so they decided to not play any cards at all. Everything is looking good on our end. So now we'll play the branded opening. Branded opening here is also checking for an Ash Blossom, but it's not the only thing that could be activated. Keep in mind that Max C can just be dropped, or Fuelos can just be dropped at almost any point in time. So we could end up reading a card like that as well. So we'll activate branded opening. You see how it flipped like that to our opponent's field? It's now lit up red. Our opponent has something, but we don't know what yet. But based off of the previous turn, based off of that Fuelos, we believe he doesn't have Ash Blossom. He didn't set any cards, so he definitely doesn't have Called by the Grave. There's no monsters on the board to target and negate with infinite impermanence. So we don't believe he has infinite impermanence. This could be a Maxi. This could be a Fulos. There's not many cards he can activate here. So we'll go ahead. And now, branded opening has two things that you can do. You're choosing a Despia monster from your deck and either special summoning it or adding to your hand. You get to choose which effect when the card goes to resolve. And what that means is after your opponent has the option to activate something, and as you can see, they're about to drop Maxi, we will then have the ability to choose whether we want to special summon or we want to search. So they drop Maxi. Now every time we special summon, they're going to get a draw. So instead of special summoning, we'll go ahead and do the add to hand. We're going to discard Albion as a part of the cost for playing it. And we're thinking about a Luber, and right here, I'm thinking, okay, he could still have an infinite impermanence. The fact that he had Maxi and just dropped Maxi means he could have other hand traps that weren't activatable then, but can be activatable on this normal summon that we're about to do. So we're not out of the clear yet. He could easily have something like an infinite impermanence. We'll wait and see. So since this is the case, I'm here, I'm choosing, I'm like, okay, we can go Luber, get infinite impermanence, and that'll shut down our entire turn. Or we can do a little bit of finagling and see if we can't bait anything else out. So right now I'm thinking, okay, if I get Quim, then its sending effect will get stopped by infinite impermanence. And then I can just use the Albion and Grave to send Fallen of Albaz, and then we can try and summon Fallen of Albaz during their turn and try and get Mirror Jade off that way through Quim. So we go to send something with Quim. They have a response. They're thinking. Nothing. So at this point, I'm like, wonderful. Now we can just activate Branded Fusion and we'll be good to go. So we're going to send Branded Fusion. Let's go ahead and wait for that. And then we'll use Albion and Grave to go ahead and send the trap card, Branded Retribution, to the graveyard as well. So we can banish Retribution to pick up Branded Fusion into our hand from the graveyard. Now right here, honestly, I should have been thinking, okay, he can do something. But right here, let's back up a little bit. So we just finished adding a card from our graveyard to our hand. He has something else. We still don't know what. This is also kind of reading into a possible infinite impermanence. So still believing that no Ash Blossom from the previous turn. Maxi's already been activated and we're already trying to play around it. We should be good to go. There's a possible infinite impermanence, and resolving the Branded Fusion will get us a Fallen of Albaz and Grave. So it'll be completely fine if that doesn't actually, if the fusion gets negated after it gets summoned out. The fact of the matter is we'll have gotten the materials we need into the graveyard and we can make plays off of that. That's everything that's going in my head right now. We activate Branded Fusion, and they drop the Ash Blossom. Now, we're going to back up. But Suspect, you just said that you were certain that they did not have an Ash Blossom in their hand based on the previous turn. And yes, all the information that we were given through all the previous interactions and cards that we have played would suggest that our opponent does not have Ash Blossom. But that's when toggling comes into play. This little button right here, he turned that bad boy off and made it to where he had no responses available to him. So it made it look like he didn't have anything like that. Very, very good play on our opponent. He's really try-harding to get these plays off and to prevent us from playing the game. Fortunately, I believe we win the game because we do have Max C and we do have Nibiru in hand. Two really strong hand traps. But this is a little bit of what can go into what you're thinking about when you're trying to play around hand traps or trying to read out what your opponent possibly has. Anything like that. So let's go ahead and in that little portion get back to our list of hand traps. All right, and we're back. So after that little demonstration, hopefully you guys understand a little bit better by what I mean for feeling out a hand trap. You're trying to go through the checks, trying to use what you've got available to read into what your opponent could possibly have. Now, the next card that we're going to talk about that I would say is rising up through the ranks in one of the most played hand traps is Molcharmi Fuelos. And we already went over this card a little bit, but let's go over it in detail. Why is this card seeing so much play? Because it is basically Max C, and Max C is just that good. Let's look at what it does. If you control no cards, so this card isn't being used when you're going first typically, you can discard this card and apply these effects this turn. Each time your opponent special summons a monster from the deck or extra deck, immediately draw one card. Only two places, still the two most common places to be special summoning monsters from. And then during the end turn, if the number of cards in your hand is more than the number of cards your opponent controls, plus 6, you must randomly shuffle cards from your hand into the deck so the number in your hand equals the number your opponent controls, plus 6. Essentially, this last bit of text doesn't matter that much, truthfully. Max C doesn't have this little bit at the end. You just keep all your cards. But at the end of the day, if you have 6 more cards than what your opponent has access to, period, on their field and in hand, yeah, you are probably going to win that game. You have a lot of advantage compared to your opponent. And that's it. Mainly the reason why Fuelos is being played so much is for the exact reasons why Max C is being played so much. It can literally just end games by itself. It is so good. A lot of decks just straight up don't have an answer to this resolving. That's why Fuelos is just so good. Now, the next most common hand trap that's being played right now, Effect Veiler. And there's a good reason for that. But first, let's go into it. Effect Veiler does almost the exact same thing as Infinite Impermanence, but it is a monster and can only be activated during your opponent's main phase. Now, you can control cards and still activate this card, so that can come up as well. But the main cons to this compared to Infinite Impermanence is that this can be called by the Graved. This can be played around or beaten by cards that are already being played in most decks. So that's also a part of it. But one of the pros that it has going for it is that it is a monster and it's a tuner. You could potentially give your deck some synchro plays just because this hand trap is also a tuner, and there might be a world where you want to normal summon it or find some way to special summon it and get some synchro plays off. It has a good amount of utility, honestly. The main reason why it is seeing so much play right now is because of Blue Eyes. Blue Eyes can naturally search this card out, so they're playing a healthy number of them. So Blue Eyes deck lists are 100% playing Effect Veiler, but not all of them will play Infinite Impermanence. Now, the next most common hand trap that is seeing played right now is something that wouldn't normally be considered a hand trap, but it still fits the criteria enough. And that is not just Magnemite, but the whole Bestial lineup for the most part. Almost every single Bestial monster does the same thing, which is you either target a light or a dark monster in either player's graveyard, banish it, and then special summon that monster. Why this is considered a hand trap is if your opponent controls a monster, this is now a quick effect. You can now do this during your opponent's turn without having played the game yet. Very, very good. The Bestials saw a lot of play during the Tier Limits format, where they were sending their dark monster to grave to attempt to fusion with the graveyard with, and you would banish that dark monster from the graveyard so they wouldn't get their summon to resolve. Very good. Why is it seeing a lot of play right now? Once again, Blue Eyes. Blue Eyes is the deck to beat in the format right now. It is the top deck in the format. It is the most played deck in the format. It's extremely strong, extremely versatile. Two insanely good engines that mix extremely well together, Primite and the Blue Eyes engine. Bestial Magnemite can target those light monsters in Blue Eyes graveyard and end up banishing them so they don't get the revive or whatever off of it. Very, very nice. You can banish the Maiden in White with this. This is the Bestials, fantastic to choose from. They have additional effects as well. Magnemite, being limited to one, has one of the best, which is the ability to search out another dragon to your hand. Very good. Search out another Bestial. Use another one. Bestial Druis Worm, probably the next best Bestial. If that card leaves the field, you can now send any special summon monster your opponent controls to the graveyard. So you can link off, get a newer, cooler monster off of Druis Worm, and also send your opponent's monster at the same time. Very nice. Good at breaking boards that are big dragons, 2,500. You get these big dragons on your board as well from it. You can just start running things over. It's great. So good. Bestials, highly recommend. Highly recommend. If your list wants to play Bestials, play Bestials. Very, very good cards. Now the next most common hand trap seeing play right now. Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit, why is it seeing play right now? It's seeing play because of Blue Eyes, once again. And let's back it up a little bit. We need to explain how you can play around some of these hand traps. So, Effect Veiler. How do you play around Effect Veiler? You play around it in the same way you play around Infinite Impermanence. You're trying to bait those cards out. So you're trying to put monsters on the board and activate their effects that you don't need to resolve. You're waiting to get that really important monster effect on the board until later to see if they drop in an infinite impermanence or an effect veiler. And you got to make it enticing, make it a good monster to stop to effectively bait out that hand trap. Now the Bestials, a bit harder to play around. Truth be told, unless you're playing a deck that can honestly play around Bestials, there really isn't a whole lot. If your deck gets hurt by Bestials pretty badly, there really isn't going to be playing around it very much. Mainly because they don't have the opportunity to even activate the cards until two conditions get fulfilled. You control a monster, and a light or dark monster is in the graveyard. Then they can, their field will start lighting up red, and you'll see whether or not they've got one. And if you get an opportunity to see that and read that before you send your light or dark, that's crucial for your strategy. That could be a turning point for you. You switch into something else. That's really about the only situation that you're going to have to be able to play around these cards. That, or you're just assuming your opponent's on them every single game without getting that information. And it might be the correct thing to do, but in my opinion, if you're hindering your strategy constantly because your opponent might have this card, but there's no information to tell you whether they do or not, have more fun with the game. That's what I would say. Is, you don't have to be playing like that constantly. Do what your deck does. If you lose, you lose. If you win, you win. But if your deck does cool things and you want to do cool things, but you're not doing cool things because you think everybody is on maybe specifically Bestials, maybe you should either change the strategy or throw it all in the wind and do it anyway. You gotta have fun with the game, truthfully. Now, is that the best perspective to have when you're trying to get your wins and rank up? Maybe not. Maybe you need to be playing it safe every single game. At the end of the day, it is up to you. It is up to you. So, Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. Back to this hand trap. What does it do? When a monster on the field activates its effect, or when a spell or trap that is already face up on the field activates its effect, quick effect, you can send this card from your hand or field to the graveyard, destroy that card on the field. Not the strongest hand trap in the game, but it can, still put in work. Where this card gets to see play, it's good for stopping, not necessarily stopping, but one-upping your opponent on resources when they make like an Xyz monster, for instance. They'll have to typically use 2 or more monsters to make their extra deck monsters. If you blow it up with Ghost Ogre, that's essentially a 2-for-1 or 3-for-1 or whatever. You know what I mean? It can be really good in that sense. There's a lot of monsters that need to be on the field for their effect to resolve, so you can play Ghost Ogre for that. We'll go back to something familiar. Fallen of Albaz is one of those monsters that needs to be on the field to resolve its fusion effect when trying to fuse with your opponent's monsters. So if your opponent uses a Ghost Ogre on your Fallen of Albaz, your Fallen of Albaz isn't going to resolve. The main use for this, continuous spells and continuous trap cards, are the reason why Ghost Ogre gets used the most. If there's an extremely good continuous spell or trap card that is being used a lot in the format, this card will rear its head out. Why is that? Unlike Mystical Space Typhoon, just blowing up something like Infinite Impermanence. Ghost Ogre blowing up, or a Mystical Space Typhoon, any destruction effect on a continuous spell or trap card will actually quote unquote negate that card. Why does that happen? All these continuous traps and continuous spell cards, unless it's when they play the card, they get this effect, and I do believe it even works then. We'll just scrub that information. If you play Ghost Ogre, if you blow up a continuous spell or trap card, it will stop the effect. All of them have to be on the field in order to resolve their effect. And even field spells as well, this applies to. Very, very good. Very, very good. Why this is seeing play right now? Blue Eyes' True Light Continuous Trap is a part of basically every Blue Eyes board. Primite Lordy Load, a continuous spell that is being played in so many different decks right now that can find an opportunity to use it, and is definitely being played in like every single Blue Eyes list possible. So is True Light. You're almost guaranteed to see at least those two cards, that continuous trap True Light and continuous spell Lordy Load, at some point relatively frequently, because it is the best and most played deck in the format right now. And specifically True Light. When True Light gets destroyed and goes to the graveyard, your opponent loses all of their monsters on the field instantly. It is so good. So good. It'll wipe your opponent's field, and you get rid of an annoying trap that gives them insane grind game potential. Ghost Ogre just is that good. Now, how do you play against Ghost Ogre? Well, there really isn't a lot that you can do to play around it. You can Called by the Grave it. That's something you can do to stop it. But playing around it, Ghost Ogre is a card that is hard to feel out. But, especially in True Light's case, you can kind of feel it out a little bit. And if you're still not certain, because it is extremely hard to really make that guess, with something like Blue Eyes, you can kind of prevent it from being too much of an issue. Blue Eyes Spirit Dragon can stop a graveyard effect from activating. True Light activates in the graveyard. You can negate the destruction of your monsters with Spirit Dragon. So before you use True Light, you can make a Spirit Dragon. So just in case they do drop a Ghost Ogre on your True Light, you're fine. You still get to keep your board, and you can keep making plays potentially. But we're going to go ahead and move on to another hand trap. Droll and Lockbird. Another very common hand trap in the format. Actually, no, let's go Dominus Purge. This hand trap's seeing a lot of play right now, and just basically because of Blue Eyes. Blue Eyes likes to play this card. Blue Eyes is being played a lot, so this card's being seen a lot just because of Blue Eyes. Now, this is one of the newer hand traps, similar to Dominus Impulse, both these Dominus cards. Now, if your opponent controls a card, you can activate either of these cards. We'll start with Purge. When a card or effect is activated that includes an effect that adds a card or cards from the deck to the hand, negate that effect. Then if you have a trap in your graveyard, destroy that card. If you activated this card from your hand, you cannot activate the effects of Dark, Water, and Fire monsters for the rest of this duel. Now, there's a lot going on with this card. First of all, one of the biggest reasons why it's being played right now is that it is basically another Ash Blossom. Not entirely, but it is still very good for the same reasons that Ash Blossom's very good. It's stopping that add to the hand, and everything is adding to the hand these days. Everything. And that's to be able to activate it out of your hand. You could potentially destroy that card, but that doesn't really come up very often. The other very important part about this card is that if you activate this card from your hand, you can no longer activate the effects of dark, water, and fire monsters for the rest of this duel. Now, Blue Eyes doesn't really care too much about that restriction and why this card's not being played in every deck. Fire monsters, of course, Snake Eye, all fire monsters, hates this card. This card resolves out of hand. They're just not playing for the rest of the duel. So not every deck can play this card. As well, here's a card that's extremely common. Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring is a fire attribute. That means we can no longer activate this card as a hand trap once we use Purge out of the hand. So, going second, we see an Ash Blossom and a Dominus Purge in our hand. Which one are we activating first? 100% of the time, it is Ash Blossom. 100 out of 100 times, it is Ash Blossom. If you activate Purge first, you can now no longer activate Ash Blossom. So you lose that card entirely. So this is something to think about if you're going to choose to activate this card. And same thing with Dominus Impulse, Light, Earth, and Wind monsters. If you activate this card out of your hand, you can no longer use Maxi, an Earth monster, or Fuelos, a Wind monster. So if you've got either of those cards in your hand, and you've got Dominus Impulse in your hand, you're dropping those hand traps. First thing, before this Dominus Impulse, every single time, 100 out of 100. You do not want to lose the ability to use your other resources for no reason. What can you do to play around Dominus Purge? Same thing as Ash Blossom, right? Actually, doesn't even have as many things that it can stop as Ash Blossom does. So technically even easier to play around than Ash Blossom. So you just got to feel it out. Play cards that attempt to search and kind of wait to see if they have a response for something like that. Take into consideration what may or may not be on your board and what has or has not been activated yet by your opponent during that turn. If they've already activated an Ash Blossom, you could be worrying about a Purge, or there could be nothing at all. If a response window comes up on a search, they've already activated Ash Blossom. You know Ash Blossom is a hard once per turn. They can't activate another one, so it has to be Purge. So, since it's right next to each other, we'll go ahead and cover this one too, since it's very similar. Instead of a search, when a card or effect is activated that includes an effect that special summons a monster, negate that effect. Then if you have a trap in your graveyard, destroy that card. Then the attributes you're restricted from are Light, Earth, and Wind monsters. Obviously, Blue Eyes is not playing this card. Shuts you down out of lights. Basically cannot play the game anymore. That would be the reason. Now, same thing with this one. You're going to be feeling out what cards you can use to summon with. And sometimes you don't really, not very many effects attempt to special summon a monster. Typically it's in an inherent special summon, right? So definitely ways. It's in the same way with the searching effect. You're going to be trying to bait it out with as non-important special summons as possible to try and see what it is that your opponent has. Now, we're going to move on to another really important hand trap, one that comes up and can be relevant for a very long time. Nibiru. What does it do? During the main phase, if your opponent normal or special summoned five or more monsters this turn, quick effect, you contribute as many face-up monsters on the field as possible, and if you do, special summon this card from your hand, and then special summon one primal being token to your opponent's field. The attack and defense become the combined original attack and defense of all the monsters that were tributed. It's a lot going on there in the text. You can only use the effect of Nibiru, the primal being, once per turn. It's a hard once per turn as well. You are only going to be activating this once. So, what does it do? How do you play around it? It's basically a way to Regeki your opponent during their first turn or during their turn in general. It is very, very good. Tributing all of your opponent's monsters, that is very, very good. It's not destroying them either. A lot of cards get additional effects if they're destroyed or sent to the graveyard in that way. Very, very nice. Very, very nice. How do you play around it? Well, let's go back up to the top. It's during the main phase specifically. And if you have summoned 5 or more monsters at all that turn, normal, special summon, any amount of combinations, does not matter. 5 or more. Which means if you can get something like Appaloosa, something that can negate a monster that activates in the hand, you can stop this card. Why do I bring up Appaloosa specifically? Appaloosa is very good for stopping a card like Nibiru. It is kind of like that threshold that a lot of modern decks are able to push over to make Nibiru not be seen quite as much as it used to be seen. If your deck can get to an Appaloosa within five summons, your deck can play around Nibiru. The idea is you summon 4 monsters. That's 4 summons. On the 5th summon, you link all 4 of them into Appaloosa. As the 5th summon, Appaloosa is down. Now, since you have summoned 5 times, your opponent can activate Nibiru. If they do, you can use Appaloosa to negate its monster effect and then stop it from resolving. Very strong. Very strong. Nibiru is such a great card, especially in combination with either Maxi or Fuelos. One of my favorite combinations is to be going second, dropping a Maxi or dropping a Fuelos. Our opponent decides that they're just going to play into it anyway. We're drawing. Oh, look at that. We drew into Nibiru. Immediately, we'll tribute off our opponent's field, summon the token on their field, summon the Nibiru card onto our field, and now not only are they giving us a ton of draws, but now they have to play through essentially their board just being completely destroyed. Very, very strong card. Very strong card. Now, some of the lesser played hand traps that are still really good. what we almost covered earlier. Duel and Lockbird. If a card is added from the main deck to your opponent's hand except during the draw phase, quick effect, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard. For the rest of this turn, cards cannot be added from either player's main deck to the hand. What this means: after you search your first card to your hand, your opponent can drop Duel and Lockbird on you. Now, for the rest of that turn, you can no longer search cards to your hand. Very, very strong effect. Very strong effect. The way you play around this, if your deck is very hurt by Duel and Lockbird, it's actually quite the opposite. If you don't care as much about Ash Blossom, but you care more about the Duel and Lockbird coming down, your draw has to resolve in order for them to have an opportunity to activate Duel and Lockbird. So they can't Ash Blossom your search and then follow up with a Duel and Lockbird. They can't deny you the search and then deny you searches for the rest of the turn. It's one or the other. Either they negate that search and allow you to have another attempt, or they allow you to have that search, but now no more searches for the rest of the turn. So keeping that in mind, if you are hurt more by Duel and Lockbird than you are hurt by Ash Blossom, your best search should be the first thing that you're trying to activate. That way, even if they do Duel and Lockbird you've already gotten the most crucial part of your deck searched out, and you can kind of just move along with the rest of your cards from there. And that's about the best advice I can give you for something like Duel and Lockbird. It, again, isn't seed as much anymore. This is a very format-dependent card, similar to Ghost Ogre. It's a very format-dependent card. The next very common, or not very common, but one of the lesser common, but still common hand traps that you could end up seeing is Ghost Spell and Haunted Mansion. Now, this is essentially another Ash Blossom, but not as good. It has the same activation requirements, which is fulfill one of these three effects. Your opponent attempts to do one of these three effects, and you can negate it. But Ghost Spell and Haunted Mansion, great example of why it's not seeing as much play as like Infinite Impermanence, but is still similar to Ash Blossom. So why isn't it as good? It has three different things that it can stop. Surely it must be a really good card, and it is a really good card. It can stop three different effects, but those three effects just aren't as common. You may not even get the opportunity to use it in a duel. That's how uncommon some of these effects are. So let's go ahead and see what those effects are. When your opponent attempts to do any of these effects, you can negate that activation. Those effects are adding a card or cards from the graveyard to the hand, deck, or extra deck. Special summoning a monster from the graveyard. Banishing a card or cards from the graveyard. What Ghost Spell and Haunted Mansion basically says, if you're playing a deck that likes to manipulate the graveyard, shut it down. This is the hand trap that shuts down a lot of different graveyard effects. Very good. Just not seeing quite as much anymore because, not quite as many graveyard effects rolling around. DD Crow, the next hand trap we'll be talking about. One more after this, and then we'll be looking at the two other cards. DD Crow. One of the oldest hand traps along with Effect Veiler. Still sees play to this day, just not nearly as much. What does it do? Quick effect. You can discard this card to the graveyard, target one card in your opponent's graveyard, banish that target. Very simple. You can use multiple of them. You have multiple in your hand, you can drop multiple in a turn. Why is it not seeing as much play anymore? It's very simple. We have the Bestials. And the Bestials are basically DD Crow, but a little bit better. Just a tiny bit better. Pros and cons. DD Crow, it can banish any card in our opponent's graveyard. But that's all it's going to do. The Bestials, however, even though they're restricted to light and dark, and it has to be monsters specifically, monsters are the most played and most important cards in the game, undeniable. You also get very big dragons to start beating over your opponent with. These dragons have other effects as well, like Magnemite, searching another Bestial to hand potentially. Druid Worm, disrupting your opponent if it leaves the field. But light and dark attribute are also the two most common attributes to see overall in the game. So if they're going to be two attributes, those are the two attributes that you want to see on a card to be able to stop. Light and dark are the best two attributes that you can have for it. And those would be the reasons why the Bestials are played over your DD Crows. Now, if your deck gets really hurt by DD Crow, I would suggest, honestly, playing as if your deck gets shut down by DD Crow by it banishing like a spell or trap card specifically, or a non-light or dark monster, and you're not like the top threat in the format, or one of the top 3 threats in the format, I would not care. DD Crow is not played that often to be actively playing around. You're going to see the Bestials way more often than DD Crow. So there really isn't like tips on playing around DD Crow unless we're talking about something specific, or we're talking about a format that specifically got this card roaming around pretty commonly. So DD Crow, still a good card, can see some play. Not as good as the Bestials overall. You're not going to be seeing it nearly as much as the Bestials. You really shouldn't have to worry too much about DD Crow coming down. Now the last hand trap, it's a big one. And there's a reason why I saved it for last. This one, it's limited to 1 for a reason. Maxi is semi-limited to 2. Dimension Shifter is limited to 1. There is a really good reason for this. 1, its activation requirement is very hard for most decks to have available. So it's really, if you're playing it in any deck, then you're only going to see use out of it going second. It's limited to 1, so it's very rarely going to happen. But why is it limited to 1? This card is disgusting. Let's read it. If you have no cards in your graveyard, quick effect, you can send this card from your hand to the graveyard until the end of the next turn. Any card sent to the graveyard is banished instead. Just completely denying your opponent their graveyard for the whole turn and the next turn as well. For 2 whole turns, no graveyard for either player. An insanely powerful card. This, in my opinion, is the second most powerful hand trap in Yu-Gi-Oh! Shifter is just that good. But, why did I save it for last? You are almost never going to be coming across this card. Reason being, very few decks are willing to put this card in their deck for that small chance of being able to activate it while going second. It is just too uncommon to see it. It's too hard to maintain the no cards in your graveyard, but it is such a powerful hand trap that we are going to review it. And there are decks that are relevant too that play this card. 3 of them I can shoot off the top of my head. It is the original deck that made this card a bit of an issue, Fluwandereeze. All they do is normal summon. All their cards get banished anyway. They do not care. It is a part of their strategy's theme to be picking cards out of the graveyard. They could care less if their cards out of the banishment pile. They could care less if their cards get banished at all. So of course they're playing this card. They were playing it at 3 when it was at 3. Auto include every Fluwandereeze deck this card every single time. Not even a question. Another deck that's playing this card, Kashtira. Kashtira's boss monster, Arise Heart, already shuts down the graveyard for your opponent. So it already kind of just doesn't care about its cards being banished anyway. So, I mean, its continuous spell and continuous trap can special summon monsters from the banishment pile. So it doesn't really matter if their stuff is getting banished at all. So they're playing Shifter. Another deck, way more recent than either of them, Ritual Beasts. Ritual Beasts do not care about their stuff being banished. They actually won it a lot of times. So this could be beneficial to them. Those decks are playing this card in every single list. It is one of, if not the best hand trap in their deck. Now, how do you play around this card? Similar to Droll and Lockbird or DD Crow, it not being as common, or Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion, it not being as common means that you aren't having to actively play around this card, and you shouldn't. But anti-meta options can come up. Other decks can make this card rise to the surface and start becoming a lot more common and really make you think about what you want to do. If Shifter becomes more prevalent, maxing your opponent in the draw or standby phase becomes more of a thing to do. You cannot activate Maxi or Fuelos because they have to go to the graveyard when a Shifter is active. You cannot activate Effect Veiler when a Shifter is activated. And keep in mind, Shifter is active for 2 whole turns. That is crazy. That is crazy. So, not only is Shifter a way to kind of play around Maxi, but it's something that kind of forces out some cards immediately. If their deck gets hurt that badly by Shifter, a Called by the Grave could be the immediate answer. And then you can drop your Maxi and watch them squirm. So, an insanely good hand trap. keep this hand trap in mind. Now, we should have gone over almost every single card that I have in this deck list for you guys right here, except for 2 cards. Called by the Grave, Crossout Designator. Now, you guys should know what Called by the Grave does by now. But if you don't, and I've mentioned it a few times now already in this video, but if you don't, we'll go ahead and go over it. Now, this is not a hand trap. This is one of your tools that you have to fight against hand traps. And you should be really considering playing this card in your deck, if not every single deck. Called by the Grave. Target 1 monster in your opponent's graveyard, banish it, and if you do, until the end of the next turn, its effects are negated, as well as the activated effects and effects on the field of monsters with the same original name. What that essentially means, if you can successfully banish a monster with Called by the Grave, all of its effects are done. All copies of it, whether or not there's another copy of that card on the field or not, it's getting negated. Called by the Grave is just that good. But why it gets used to stop hand traps all the time? Let me paint you a scenario. Your opponent drops Maxi on your turn. You then you respond with Called by the Grave. The Maxi gets discarded to graveyard as part of the cost for activating the card. You now target the Maxi in their graveyard, banish it, and negate its effects for the rest of the turn and the next turn. That Maxi just got negated and stopped, and you can do that with all of the monster hand traps that have to discard themselves to the graveyard. And what are those hand traps? Almost all of them. That's why Called by the Grave is just that good. DD Crow, Effect Veiler, Droll and Lockbird, Maxi, Ghost Ogre, Ash Blossom, Ghost Bell, Foolos, even Dimension Shifter. Now, since Bestial Magnuma and the other Bestials, they just summon themselves onto the field, you can't Call by the Grave that. Nibiru, same thing, just summons itself onto the field. Can't Call by the Grave that, but what can you do? Crossout Designator, another tool that you have to be able to fight against hand traps, but a little bit of requirement. In order to negate a hand trap with Crossout Designator, you need to be playing that hand trap in your deck. And it needs to be in the deck when you go to activate this card. What it does, you pick 1 card from your deck, banish it, and for the rest of this turn, that card is negated for both players. What does that mean? Again, they play Maxi, you in response play Crossout Designator, banish a copy of Maxi from your deck, and now Maxi is negated for that rest of the turn. Very good. Something that's really nice about Crossout Designator is that Infinite Impermanence, what's normally better than Effect Veiler because it can't be Called by the Grave, can be Crossout Designated. If you play an Infinite Impermanence in your deck, they go to Infinite Impermanence, and you have Crossout Designator, you can now chain the Crossout Designator, banish the Infinite Impermanence from your deck, and negate that Infinite Impermanence and stop it from stopping you. Crossout Designator is limited to 1 for a very, very good reason. It is just that good. It's just that good. Personally, I would highly recommend putting 2 copies of Maxi, 3 copies of Ash Blossom, 2 copies of Called by the Grave, and a copy of Crossout Designator in every single deck that you play. that will give you 6 outs to max C, and then your 2 max C as well. And then if you don't need the outs to max C, Ash Blossom is a disruption, and Called by the Grave can be a good graveyard disruption as well. But these are all the hand, or at least the most relevant hand traps that I could think of that you should be seeing most commonly. Some tools and plans and ideas on how to play around those hand traps or how to deal with them. And hopefully you guys enjoyed this video and found it informative. I'm glad to have brought this video out to you guys. I worked pretty hard on it, but I really enjoyed recording it. I really enjoyed editing it for you guys. So either way, I had a fun time. Hope you guys did as well. If you guys enjoy this content, make sure you leave a like, comment, and you subscribe. And be sure to stay tuned, because Monday we're going to have a whole nother Yu-Gi-Oh video, baby. We'll see you guys next time.